I like to think of persuasion as being I like to think of persuasion as being like a chess game. Anyone can play, but you're usually not going to win unless you understand the rules and follow a few basic guidelines. You can sit down and throw some pieces around one at a time, but you're going to lose if you don't pay attention to what should be done, what needs to be done, and when it needs to be done. In a persuasive speech, there are a few things that you need to understand. First, that every element of the speech should do one of three things. The first thing that it should do is to reinforce your argument. Now recognize that in persuasion, not everything needs to be a disagreement with someone else. Sometimes you're giving a persuasive speech to an audience that generally agrees with you, but you're going to reinforce this argument. You're going to make them have a stronger level of commitment to what you're talking about, to your particular position. And so reinforcing an argument is quite important. Or you should be weakening the opposition. Sometimes your persuasion isn't about building up supports for your particular position. Sometimes it's tearing down what others are saying. Or sometimes you are going to simply encourage undecided listeners. Again, persuasion is not about taking someone who disagrees with you and in 7 to 10 minutes get them to rapidly agree with you. That's unlikely and unrealistic. But to be able to encourage those who don't have an opinion, and at the end of your speech that they will lean a little bit more in your direction, that would be success. So recognize that everything you do in a persuasive speech should do one of these three things. This would include your introduction and conclusion. Your book talks about the different types of persuasive messages, that we have questions of fact, questions of value, questions of policy. These are quite important, and I want to focus on this for a little while, and then in particular deal with policy speeches. Now, most topics that you would like to discuss in a speech can fit in any of these types of speech. Most topics could be a question of fact, question of value, or a question of policy. I find policy speeches to be very easy to set up, create, implement, and then be able to give. So I'm going to be guiding you into giving a policy speech first. And then for your final speech, you may give a persuasive speech that could be either value, fact, or to do a second policy speech. But let's take a look at different topics and how they might be dealing with different questions. Let's say I want to give a speech on volunteering, and if I'm going to give the speech on volunteering, I might decide to persuade my audience to donate time as a community volunteer. So here I'm asking my audience to do something in particular, and whenever there's an action, that's going to be a policy speech. But perhaps I want to take a slightly different angle and persuade my audience that they have a moral obligation to help people less fortunate than themselves. And this, of course, would be a value speech. Whenever you see words like moral, whenever you see obligation, you see right, wrong, positive, negative, these are all clues that you have a question of value. Let's say I wanted to persuade my audience that there is a serious shortage of community volunteers. Here I am trying to convince them of the fact of a matter. Another topic. Say I want to talk about TV violence. To persuade my audience that violence on TV is a major cause of violent behavior in society, and this would be dealing with a question of fact. And by the way, there's very limited research that supports this position. Even though it's a fairly popular social argument, there really isn't good research to back it up. So this speech would need to have some real good evidence to convince me of this fact. might decide to persuade my audience that the federal government has a moral duty to monitor the amount of violence in TV programming. Now, take a look. Again, we have that word moral. And so whenever we have a moral here, then that would tell us that we have a question of value. Last, let's say I want to persuade my audience that further reforms should be enacted to reduce the amount of violence on TV programs designed for children. Whenever you see the words should be, you are almost always talking a persuasive policy speech, that someone needs to do something. I recognize that the policy could be that an action needs to be taken by an audience member, but it could also be that another agency, such as the government, might need to be adopting this policy. So as I mentioned, you're going to be focusing on persuasive policy speeches. Why is this? There's a beautiful structure that comes from a persuasive policy speech, and I think it helps with the structure and the planning so that when you decide to do a value or fact speech, that you understand more about the nature of how persuasion works. And it's because persuasive policy speeches have three elements that need to be in there: need, plan, and practicality. So let's look at this in some steps. First of all, if we want to establish a need, we're telling people that there's some kind of action that has to be taken, which means we're trying to convince people to move away from the status quo. And in order to change something, we have to give them a reason to change. So we have to make them feel that they're lacking something now, that there is another idea, thing out there that would fill this need that they have. Because if they're happy and satisfied with where they are, they have no reason to even consider a change in their policy. For instance, if I'm in the audience and you're trying to persuade me to volunteer, if I feel very satisfied with where I am in my life without volunteering, I'm really not going to seriously consider becoming a volunteer unless you make me feel something in which I feel inadequate or I feel guilty if I'm not volunteering. You have to evoke a need if it's not already there. So convince the audience they need to change the status quo, how things are right now. So how do you do this? How do you make people believe that they need to change how they are now? Maslow's hierarchy of needs is probably the best tool to use to think about getting people to feel the needs that we have. And Abraham Maslow, a sociologist, psychologist who took a look at what are the needs that all humans have, what are the most basic needs. And he wrote about this idea that our physiological needs, our biological needs are the bottom of a pyramid, and that if we are not having our physical needs met, we really can't think much about our higher needs. Usually in persuasive policy speeches, we're not getting too much at physical needs, but sometimes we are. Sometimes healthy eating, or we might be, how to get a better night's sleep might be another thing that could hit this. But usually we're not looking so much at these in the United States. In general, people are well fed, well rested, and have this need met. But if they don't, if I want you to feel like you have some kind of biological or physical need, I'm going to make you think about what you're doing is wrong. Let's say I want to convince you not to have gluten in your diet. I may now explain all the problems of gluten and what happens and how this is slowing you down, whether you know it or not. So that would be if I wanted to persuade you not to have gluten. Now, why would I want to persuade you not to have gluten? I don't know. It's just an example. Once our physiological needs are met, then we have safety needs. And if I wanted to evoke a safety need in you, I'm going to have to make you fairly quickly feel unsafe. Now, this could be, I might want to make you feel unsafe about your physical self, that you could be murdered or assaulted at any time, or I could try to make you feel unsafe financially, that you're making decisions that are going to cause you ruin in 10 years. There are many different safety needs that I could hit here, but if I want to give you a policy that will help you to become safer in some way, I have to make you feel unsafe. So if I want to convince you to take a taekwondo or a some type of active class, then I have to make you feel it in some way you're physically unsafe, so you need to take a class to learn how to defend yourself. The next rung on the pyramid are belonging needs. All humans have a need to belong. This is fairly profound. Even infants have these strong needs, and if you've ever taken psychology or sociology, you've probably looked at this more in depth with particular case studies of children who died when they were not cuddled, and even as infants, given a sense of belonging. So it's fairly profound. And if I want people in my audience to make a change in their life, belonging is actually a fairly easy one to hit. Let's say I want to convince you to volunteer again. If I want to convince you about the volunteering, I could perhaps try to make you, I could go with one of these lower needs and talk about physiological needs. Maybe you don't have needs for hunger to be sated, but maybe I could make you feel guilty about other people who are hungry, and that our community isn't safe when we have people who are starving. Or I could hit you at the belonging needs and talk about the wonderful group of volunteers who are there in the community that we've built, and how we support each other and become friends with the people that we're helping and become a support for them, and all together we belong. I could do this. The next rung are esteem needs. And this is that sense of respect that we have. It could be self-esteem. Do I respect myself? But it's also esteem needs in terms of, do other people hold me in high esteem? That we want to be respected. And again, for my volunteering speech, I might decide to hit the esteem needs, that you will feel better about yourself if you're volunteering. Other people will respect you more if you're volunteering. And so I'm going to make you feel like you don't have enough respect right now, and so you should volunteer. And the top rung of that is the self-actualization. That's the top of the pyramid in the traditional Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And for the self-actualization step, this is that be all that you can be. And so I'm going to try to convince you that you are not all you can be yet, if I'm going to hit you at the self-actualization phase. And if you want to be the best you, then you need to get out there and you need to do something like volunteering. Little side note, there are additional items on this pyramid, but they're rarely dealt with. But if you're ever in a trivia contest, just knowing that there's more to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you win every time. So, we've talked about needs. You want to evoke a need. Your step 2 is to give a plan. Tell your audience exactly what you want to be done. And here we're going to be specific, and we're going to repeat it many times, because we want them to know exactly what the should step is. So if I am doing a speech about elections, do I want you to vote in the next election? Or I want you to vote for a particular candidate in the next election? Or do I want you to, sometimes we get really specific and we know what state we're voting in, and are you pulling a lever? Are you pushing a button? Are you ripping a chad? Sometimes we get that specific of how you want the action carried out, so that people understand how serious you are about this. Or do I want you to do something a little bit milder than the actual action of pulling the lever? Do I want you to wear a political button so once you voted, so everyone knows that you voted for particular candidate. I just have to be clear and specific what action I want you to take or what action I want the other agency to take. Step 3, practicality. How easy is it to implement this particular plan? And you have to address this in a policy speech. We can't just make people feel like they're lacking, give them a plan in order to fill their need. But now I have to address, is this easy or hard? And there's not really a magic formula in persuasive policy speaking of if it should be an easy step or if it should be a difficult step. Really, the main thing is that you're addressing it. Is this easy? Great. How so? And if it's hard, that's okay too, as long as you tell us why it's worth doing, even though it's hard. So you have to tell us directly, is this plan going to cost money? If so, how much? And where is it coming from? So is it free? Will it take 5 minutes of our time? Or is it difficult but worthwhile? You just have to address these ideas so that we understand what this particular policy is going to cost us. You may need to convince the audience of the practicality. It may not be straightforward. And so we have to address this, and this is an area of authenticity. Now, it may seem like this is a lot to ask of everyone, but if you look at it this way, just tell us. It may seem difficult to vote for the person I'm recommending, but your life will be a whole lot more difficult if you don't, and the other candidate wins because, and then we give the reasons of why life would be more difficult with the other candidate. In order to support your persuasive messages, we're going to have to get a fair amount of details in which we have 2 basic kinds of proof, inartistic proofs, and then we'll have artistic proofs. But inartistic proofs we're generally not going to use, so this is a do not use. This would be coercion, forcing people to adopt our policy. Brainwashing. Again, these are things we're not going to do. They're inartistic proofs. Torture is yet another one. Ways that people will adopt a persuasive policy against their will. Now, artistic proofs is what we're going to be focusing on. And I only bring up the inartistic because by talking about what we're not going to do with the inartistic proofs, I want you to realize that the artistic proofs that I'm about to mention, they're called artistic for a reason. You need to use them artfully. They're not a guarantee. Just because you have information that is convincing by itself, how you present it to us will change whether or not it's going to actually work in your speech. Artistic proofs include logos, pathos, ethos. Now, what are these? If you've read the book, you know what they are. I'll talk a little bit more about them in another lecture video series, though. But for now, I want you to go out and be thinking about your persuasive policy speech. What is it that you're going to convince us needs to be done? What should we be doing? What should another agency be doing? And I want you to think about what is the need? Why do we need this policy? How are you going to make us feel we're lacking? What is the plan? And then how practical is this plan?